Another phenomenon that we are seeing today is the emergence of the Indo-Pacific. Now, the Indo-Pacific was not a term that was used much until about, say, 2014 or so. Although about 7 years before that, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan had right here in Delhi proclaimed that that is going to be a major phenomenon, a major area of growth and a major area of cooperation. In fact, the term Indo-Pacific was really built on a quote that Shinzo Abe shared in the Indian Parliament, where he quoted from Dara Shikoh, who was, those who know Indian history, son of Shah Jahan. And Dara Shikoh had talked about the confluence of two seas, talking about the Indian Ocean and other oceans. So picking up on that term, the Indo-Pacific kind of started then, and then various events brought it together. The tsunami of 2004 brought countries working together. And then eventually, the four countries, namely the US, India, Australia, and Japan, felt that there are many areas where they can cooperate closer together. And that eventually became the Quad. Now, the Quad doesn't yet have a major economic dimension, but in all likelihood, it will have an economic dimension. In fact, one of the entities associated with the Quad is the Quad Investor Network. Carl Mehta is here, who chairs that. He will be the speaker after this. I happen to work with him in that space. But this is an area where the four countries are trying to bring in an economic dimension to the Quad, which was otherwise based on strategic cooperation. Now, coming to the context of today's discussion, which is titled From Homelands to Global Markets. Now, moving from homelands, in your home country, to global markets is an essential step in terms of evolution for countries that want to advance their economies. I can tell you in the US, where I was the head of the US Commercial Service and focused on increasing US exports, we would find that most businesses in the US would sell and operate just within their state. Most of them, numerically. Then some of them would go to the adjoining state. But the moment they found in a market outside the country, they would find their growth really growing by an order of magnitude. It wasn't like a 10% growth or 20% growth. They grow tenfold the moment they found a market somewhere else. For a number of reasons. One is they would get more competitive, and by getting more competitive, they could sell even more within the United States. So essentially, exports are extremely valuable to growth and development. Their profits would be higher. They could pay their employees more. So exports are really important for economic development. Global trade, therefore, is really a force multiplier that can move economies into new orbits. I mentioned the East Asian tigers, Singapore and Malaysia and all those countries that really got propelled up by trade. And the biggest example, of course, is China, which over the last 40 years has raised their living standards, become the major global trading power. Today, China's trade is about 14% of all trade in the world is China. The United States is 8-point-something%. India is like 4%. On the ascendant. If you look at manufacturing, China manufactures. Why do they have so much trade? Because they manufacture a lot and sell a lot. They have something like 28% of global manufacturing. The US has probably about 12% or so. And India is much, much less. So you see the importance of both manufacturing and trade to increasing incomes, increasing prosperity. So that's the context for our panel. Our panel is very well qualified to address this topic of moving from homelands to multiple continents. And in fact, we have people from the panel actually reference multiple continents. And let me introduce each one of them. From North America, we have Goldie Hyder. Goldie is the president and CEO of the Business Council of Canada. He is, which is an organization representing the chief executives and heads of 150 leading Canadian businesses. He was formerly president and CEO of Hill Knowlton Strategies Canada, providing strategic communications counsel to the firm's diverse and extensive client base. And before that, he was director of policy and chief of staff to Joe Clark, former prime minister and former leader of the federal Progressive Conservative Party. So welcome. Thanks, Goldie. North America to South America. We have Varsha Sharon Sarjo. She's the CEO of the Rudisa Group of companies, one of Suriname's biggest conglomerates. She has an amazing story. She started by selling poultry as a part-time job within a small family-based company, and that would rapidly grow into a multinational organization with over 1,000 employees. So great story, Varsha, welcome. And then from the Middle East, from Qatar and Abu Dhabi, we have my friend, Dr. Mohammed Altaf, director of the Lulu Group International. Altaf spearheads the company's strategic expansion and new revenue streams. He oversees the group's export and distribution operations across Europe, Australia, and the US. In fact, I could not say he's from the Middle East because he's all over the world. In fact, I first met Altaf when he was setting up Lulu's operations in America, and I was in the Department of Commerce, and we were welcoming their investment in America. So welcome. And from Australia, we have Tim Thomas, CEO, Centre for Australia-India Relations. He's been actively involved for many years in many dimensions of the Australia-India relationship. He has 20 years of experience in senior executive roles, working across the Indo-Pacific region in strategic leadership, corporate development, and management. And I've known Tim from when we were both at KPMG, so welcome, Tim. Tim also brought a bag of goodies for all of us, Tim. And he'll talk about that when he comes. So now what we will do is we'll have opening comments from each of our speakers. And maybe we can start, I'm going to sit that in, so we'll start with you, Tim.
Thank you. Do I have the mic on? Yeah, okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Arun, and thank you, Jay, for the welcome as well, and to MR and the Indiaspora team for putting on an amazing event. One of the reasons why I'm here, other than my personal connection, is the Centre for Australia-India Relations has so much to learn from Indiaspora. The Indiaspora is a global centre of excellence of Indian diaspora engagement. So thank you for allowing CARE, the Centre for Australia-India Relations, to learn and to be part of this vibrant forum. So let me just give you a little bit of context on the Australia-India relationship, and then I'll dive into the specifics around the Indian diaspora strategy for Australia. The Australia-India geostrategic and geopolitical relationship is at a high point, and that can no better be demonstrated by the number of ministerial visits we have between the two countries. The number of prime ministerial meetings that have happened over the last couple of years is unprecedented, and I think we all understand a little bit about the geostrategic context for that, particularly in terms of the Quad relationship and other geostrategic factors. So in 2020, India joined a select number of countries in which Australia has a comprehensive strategic partnership with. And this was underpinned by a shared vision of an open, inclusive, and prosperous Indo-Pacific region, which Arun talked about. In 2022, Australia was only the only country in 10 years, only the second country in 10 years, to sign a free trade agreement with India, and negotiations are now underway for a comprehensive economic cooperation agreement. However, our economic relationship today is not playing to its full potential, even though I would say the architecture has been set up very well over the last couple of years. So our bilateral trade between Australia and India is about $27 billion, which is, for Australia, only 10% of the bilateral trade with China. We make up only 0.23% of India's foreign direct investment. And whilst we have around 400 educational partnerships across the corridor, we have yet to get to a track record or momentum of accelerating research, commercialization of research across the corridor. So if you like, that's our starting point. The potential to uplift trade, investment, and innovation is vast. If you look at Australia, we have our natural resources, our mining capability, our critical minerals, premium food products. We have long-term investable capital in our superannuation system, $3.5 trillion of assets under management. We have education, research, capabilities which are very relevant to India's priorities of growth. If we think about renewables, energy transition, advanced manufacturing, agribusiness and nutritional security, and even sport. We have amazing research institutions that have very relevant technical capabilities in those areas. And then if we think about opportunities for Australian companies, clearly to be part of the breakneck growth in the Indian e-commerce and technology sector, including access, of course, to over 900 million internet users in India. India, of course, has that very young and dynamic labor force. And we kind of see a government, an Indian government, which is determined to steer India as a global alternative manufacturing hub and really offering the global alternative supply chains that Arun was talking about. So you can see a strong level of complementarity between the two economies. Our Foreign Minister, Penny Wong, has emphasized that Australia's modern identity must be the starting point of our engagement with the world. And it's our multicultural identity that's a crucial part of who we are as Australians. And as the Foreign Minister says, when people from every part of the world look at Australia, they can see themselves reflected in us. And when Australians look within ourselves, we see ourselves as sources of connection and understanding with the world. And this is similar to what Arun was talking about. If I then kind of flip it to the Indian government side, and I think some of our Australian colleagues were at that massive Indian diaspora event, 20,000 people in May, in which Prime Minister Modi spoke to. Incredibly electric atmosphere, but also the representation from the Australian political leadership was incredible across federal, state, and local levels. And at that event, Prime Minister Modi articulated his capture of the strategic partnership with Australia. He used the words mutual respect, mutual understanding. He said that's where we need to be with Australia, no less. So moving away from the traditional cliched relationships of the Commonwealth, the curry and cricket, and he went through the alphabet, but he said, ultimately, this is where we need to land. This is where we are today. And the relevance of saying that in that audience with 20,000 adoring, patriotic Australian Indians was not lost on anyone. So, then if I can then just come to the Centre for Australia-India Relations, as Jay said, it was established, it was announced with my appointment in February, and it was formally launched by our Prime Minister in May, in the presence of Prime Minister Modi. And it is really trying to embody these aspirations from both countries. It's part of projecting modern Australia to the world and giving a platform for multicultural Australians to enhance our country's trade and investment ties with India. So it's really important that in this multilateral world, we see our Indian diaspora in Australia as part of what Indiaspora has pulled together as a multi-country movement, a multi-country force for good, but also how we see ourselves as the Indian diaspora as part of our multicultural settings in Australia. So the centre's mission, if you like, and our centre for short is called CARE, Centre for Australia-India Relations, is to transform economic engagement between Australia and India, underpinned by mutual understanding and deep people-to-people ties. And one of our centre's imperatives is to address these outdated perceptions about India, including about the risks of doing business in India. So this is one of the key imperatives that we're trying to tackle in uplifting the economic relationship. We heard from Emily yesterday that almost 1 million people of our 26 million population claim of Indian heritage in our last census. And as Emily said yesterday, over 750,000 of those are actually born in India. So this is a diaspora that is the fastest growing large diaspora in Australia, but it also has an incredible currency of networks and relationships and knowledge of India. So in our two publicly available documents, and Arun alluded to this, I've got it in a Woolworths bag. Thank you, Prachi, for bringing this all the way from Australia. We have two reports that I would really commend reference to. One is the India Economic Strategy, which Peter Varghese, a former High Commissioner to India, wrote in 2018. But then we had this report, which is a comprehensive mapping of the Indian diaspora in Australia, commissioned by the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And I've got multiple copies if this is of interest. I know MR, when he came to Australia in November, was particularly taken by this. But it identifies, the Australian government has identified India's diaspora as a national economic asset that should be engaged to enhance our economic relationship with India. The report highlights that this community is one whose entrepreneurial spirit, education, and links into innovation should be harnessed to seize new opportunities with India. So CARE is actively driving this agenda with new engagement programs with the Indian diaspora and stands to learn a lot from the programs that are already proven that have been executed through Indiaspora, and particularly its global Force for Good mantra, which we think is incredibly powerful. So if I can then just give a couple of examples of where already the Indian diaspora is contributing to the entrepreneurialism of Australia. Didi Saxena, an Indian-born Australian entrepreneur whose agribusiness Riverina Oils and Bioenergy address India's demand for healthier options for cooking oils, helping reduce blood sugar levels. When Saxena faced difficulties with securing finance in Australia, he successfully pivoted to securing finance from Indian banks and other international investors, and now he's set up a refining plant in regional New South Wales, employing over 300 people. Another example is around ANZ Bank. And let me go to the other end of the spectrum, big corporate end of town. ANZ, of course, is one of our big four Australian banks, who recently led a very significant visit to India with its board. The inroads of, and it is, by the way, the largest Australian company in India, so 8,000 employees of ANZ in India. And it's now revisiting all of the opportunities in the trade and investment corridor and looking again at its retail presence. Its remarks after its trip has had a really head-turning effect on the other banks, the other big four banks in Australia, to refresh their India strategies. Now that work was led by a very senior Indian diaspora executive at ANZ, which gave, I think, a level of confidence with Shane Elliott, the CEO, to really revisit its India plans. Another example, Power Ledger, an Australian blockchain firm from Western Australia, who successfully navigated the Indian markets with the assistance of an Indian-Australian diaspora connection. I met the founder and then the Indian diaspora India lead recently. So Power Ledger developed the world's first renewable energy blockchain trading platform. It gained major success in Uttar Pradesh when the state government partnered with Power Ledger to pilot its technology. The results have been astounding. The Power Ledger platform has created a buying price for power that is 43% lower than the prevailing retail tariff. Similarly, the connections of the Indian Australians have been vital to the success of Melbourne-headquartered Rubicon Water. So Rubicon was awarded a contract to modernize an irrigation region in northern Karnataka, which was a significant breakthrough for Rubicon in one of the largest irrigation modernization projects of the world. The project aims to address water shortage issues in the region by installing accurate water control devices. Again, very much led by one of the senior executives of an Indian-Australian background who used that person's current relationships in Karnataka to access that market. And then I want to just come to one other segment, which is the research segment, the innovation segment, the collaborative capabilities that sit in the universities. Professor Nina Mithar is an Indian-Australian agricultural research scientist who leads a team of over 70 scientists, who has contributed to developing solutions to boost horticultural crop productivity, nutrition, and sustainability. So Professor Mithar has completed projects funded by the Australia-India Research Fund, including to find alternatives to chemical pesticides. But she's also drawn on her relationships to deliver collaborative projects with India, verifying the suitability of Australian native plants as inputs to industrial processes. I can go on and on about examples of, there's one in critical minerals, and in fact we're going to be joined with some of the meetings that, by that particular professor, who again has those relationships with Indian universities and Indian industry to drive collaborative research and commercialization. So these are but a few examples of the role of Indian diaspora in that living bridge that we talk about. Australia needs the Indian diaspora. The Indian diaspora needs to be actively engaged in different ways, and that's what the Centre's about.
Thank you, Tim. I thought it was very interesting to note that the Indian diaspora is being recognized as a national economic asset, and that's really very special. You referred to the reports, the two reports, one report, the Peter Varghese report. You know, the CII here has created a report that gives the Indian perspective, which is like the counter, which is the complementary view to the Peter Varghese report. So for those who are interested, in addition to the report from Australia, there's also a report from India, from CII, on the India-Australia trade relationship. So let me move on to South America. Varsha.
Good morning. First of all, please allow me to thank Indiaspora and their leadership for inviting me to speak at this historic event. I am immensely honored that I'm allowed to address you all for this discussion. So I'll predominantly focus on trade and investment relations between Suriname, the CARICOM, and Latin America, with India from the private sector perspective. Suriname faces some challenges that are common to many Caribbean nations, such as market size dependence and dependence on imports. However, its unique circumstance, including its resource-based economy and proximity to neighboring markets, also offer distinct trade opportunities. So issues such as technical assistance, infrastructure gaps that need to be addressed, regional integration, and digital economies all pose nice opportunities while being a challenge for the Caribbean countries. Seizing these opportunities will be key to Suriname, to the Caribbean, and to Latin American trade development. The Indian diaspora usually only focuses on the Suriname textile stores and retail outlets, whereas much larger opportunities present itself, such as agro-processing, alternative financing, and regional integration. Establishing a kind of India's diaspora investment vehicle for small, over-leveraged countries such as ours will give us access to bigger projects in the region. So major undertakings such as agro-processing, regional integration, infrastructure, and digital economy. We also have a dire need for technical assistance and training. Investment opportunities for India diaspora companies in the Caribbean region are diverse and can span various sectors. Some promising areas are tourism and hospitality, which have been direly impacted by COVID and the lack of transportation between the islands and the mainland. Agribusiness, which is one of our biggest opportunities at this moment. However, we do not have the capability to service the entire Caribbean. About 20% is only produced on the islands and Latin America. 80% is imported. So there's a lot of opportunity in the region to set up agro-processing facilities. There's also healthcare. There are opportunities in healthcare, education, manufacturing, telecommunications, and there are options for special economic zones. Our company, Rudisa International, has 29 companies in 7 countries with over 1,200 employees. So we have extensive knowledge in how to navigate this part of the world with different legal systems, different languages, and different cultures. I've had the pleasure of witnessing firsthand the impact of Indian diaspora entrepreneurs in the Caribbean and Latin America. I think the main driver behind the successful strategies used by Indian diaspora is our ability to adapt to different cultures, different languages, and different ways of doing business. We do, however, always keep our culture close to the vest, and I think that is one of our strengths. Understanding these markets we are in and knowing our way around these markets is crucial for our success. And a strong network of like-minded entrepreneurs, like this one that I'm delighted to talk to today, is crucial to the success. We have had our fair share of luck seekers in the region, and as fast as they came, they've left. And this is usually because it's quite difficult to navigate a region because we speak various languages and have different legal systems. So you have the Dutch legal system, the French legal system, English common law, some American law, even the accounting systems vary widely. So you have US GAAP on one part, you have IFRS on one part, you have Dutch GAAP on one part. So it's difficult for somebody that's not from the region to do business with us. My own president, for instance, is of Indian origins, also the one from Guyana. And they have great relationships now with India. And they're trying to reestablish the lost connection over the years of the 150 years that we've been in this area with India. We recently had a visit from President Murmuru in Suriname, and she made clear that she would love to reestablish connection with Suriname. In general, India and Indian diaspora related trade and investment is critical to the prosperity and sustainable development in all its facets to the country and the Caribbean region. It will certainly fuel social economic growth, diversification of our economy, and gradually fulfill the ambitions of the Caribbean, especially the Surinamese government and the Guyanese government, to become the food basket of the Caribbean and a trade and technology innovation hub for the Caribbean and Latin America. My country is at the eve of an important and exciting development in the offshore oil and gas sector as part of the Guyana-Surinamese basin. In the upcoming decade, we will have dynamic opportunities in different sectors, for instance, in infrastructure, banking, financial services, high-tech industry, including AI, healthcare facilities, telecommunications, transports, ports, airports, shipping, and hospitality. Internationally, our region is being perceived as the next oil and gas frontier of the world and already is referring to developments comparable to the Middle Eastern countries. However, with such small economies as ours and such small countries as ours, it can easily overheat. So investment and joint ventures from Indian companies is crucial for our development and sustainability. Cognizant on the fact that the influence and power of Indian diaspora are factors to reckon with because it brings to tables terms of contacts, education, skills, experience, and cultural affinity and work ethics, it can certainly boost cross-border cooperation. For me, and I know the private sector, we are looking forward to engage in strong strategic business partnership in relevant areas in which India and the Indian diaspora are interested. I'm confident that it will give an enormous boost to cross-border trade and investment in our region and in my country. And my company, Rudisa International, is ready to take up the role in connecting the Indian diaspora to the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Varsha. You know, it's really interesting that the Caribbean and also a place like East Africa and South Africa with the Indian diaspora are very natural places to increase trade between India and those countries because there is an established affinity in those countries. The other interesting thing that from the India point of view is that India has some preferential trade agreements in Latin America, like with Chile and other countries. And if you go to Chile, for example, you see Mahindra SUVs are the second most popular car on the road in Chile because as a result of the preferential trade agreement. And in India, you get wines from Chile cheaper because of the same trade agreement. So an example of how trade agreements can lift trade in both directions. So thank you for those comments. And
of course.
Goldie, over to you and pick up the North America piece.
What is it that keeps you up at night? That's the classic consultant question. And it's the question that I ask CEOs everywhere I meet them from around the world. And the answer might surprise you. The answer today in many parts of the world is the decline of democracy. When you think about it, there are less democracies in the world today than there were just 20 years ago. We're attacking the institutions in our democracy. We are attacking not just our governments, but our media, our business communities, our academic institutions. Our politics, as I referenced last night, are really extremes now. They're polarized, where the vast majority of people are living really in what my father likes to say, the radical middle. And what is it that capital likes? Capital likes predictability, stability, and confidence when it's being ready to be deployed. And it used to be that democracies offered us that. But that's no longer the case. And that's why CEOs are so stressed as they look around the world as to how to deploy capital with some confidence that a regime change or an election will not make black or white, to make black to white after every single election that happens. In your case, almost every weekend, once upon a time. But in America, every 4 years, guaranteed. In Canada, it's subject to the form of our government. And so capital, as you know, is agnostic, or neutral at least, on the issue of ideology and on nationality. It has one anthem: how to make $1 too. And it will go to wherever it can do that. It is like water. It will find the path of least resistance, it will form, and it will do what it's supposed to do. And that's what shareholders expect. And nobody's going to apologize for that. It just is. This is a fact. And we need to accept that in this environment, you will see in democracies capital freeze and or be selectively deployed and or find a way out of democracies into other forms of government. Not all democracies are the same. Not all communists are the same. Not all autocrats are the same. And when I think about democracies that are having problems today, I think specifically about America, about Canada, about Australia, about the United Kingdom, about France, about Germany, about Spain, about Netherlands. Now, what should strike you as interesting is I didn't mention the world's largest democracy, because you're not having those challenges here in India. This is, in many ways, a vibrant, functioning democracy. And so, for years, if not decades, we've been hearing that, this is India's decade. This is India's moment. And it never materialized. And more often than not, it didn't materialize because India got in her own way. And so my message to India today, as it is when Minister Goel visited us in Canada for 3 days and others, is learn from history. Don't get in your way. This is not only your decade. This is the next quarter of your century if you let it be. We're hearing what's going on here. The achievement of landing on the moon is no small feat. If you can do that, what can you not do? What can you not do if you allow yourself to do it? So I look at the road to 100, the theme of this conference, as one of India's moment. The next 25 years can really shape the trajectory of the world's largest democracy and the world's largest populous country. Now, look, nobody comes, and look, I'm not a diplomat, I'm not a politician. I work for people who just talk facts and talk the truth. And so, pardon me if this offends anybody. But the truth of the matter is, democracies, as Churchill said, are the best of the worst forms of all the rest of the governments, all the forms of governments that we can have. We're not pure. We have our own problems in democracies. And democracies, anybody who comes to the table for trade, many of our countries, mine included, and India, are protectionist. Our politics gets in the way of our protectionism. Many of us have our own degrees of human rights violations and social cohesion issues in our countries, including mine. We're still dealing with Indigenous issues in Canada. We have lots of issues here. We have issues in America that we see quite regularly, Australia and other places. And so nobody comes to these conversations with clean hands. Okay? But here's the thing. India can lead the way if it can show that democracy works. And I really believe that can be the case. I think that the foundation that at least Canadian companies have allowed India to have, particularly our pension funds, is a track record of success. I won't repeat the numbers that our High Commissioner said yesterday, but we're simply scratching the surface. You know, we do about $10 billion worth of bilateral trade with India. For context, that's exactly 4 days of trade with the United States and Canada. 4 days. So 4 days with the US gets us 10 billion. A whole year with India gets us 10 billion. So clearly there's lots of opportunity for growth. Many of our pension funds who are in Australia and in India are here because they're patient capital, but they believe in the long-term value and the long-term evaluation and the long-term trajectory and the long-term return of a country like India. And it's bearing fruit. Many of members of the Business Council of Canada who are here, I think you mentioned one of your largest is 7,000 or so. The largest Canadian company in India, Brookfield, with no partner from India, exclusively operating as their own brand, Brookfield, has 20,000 employees here in India. And they're just getting started. There's a lot more investments that are going to be coming. Our pension funds are here getting 10, 15, 18% return. In the good old days, maybe a little less so these days. Long-term patient. Look at my friend here from Fairfax, airport built by Fairfax, a fellow Hyderabadi like I am, Prem Watsa, in Bangalore here. These are stories on which India can build on success. Australia will have theirs, other regions of the world will have theirs. But in the world of unpredictability and instability, one of the things that India needs to learn, and I say this as an Indian, proud one who loves this country, believes in this country as much as I love Canada, and that is that we are not akin to getting into trade agreements. We're getting there now. India's getting there now, a little more recently. Australia and ASEAN, I believe, and UK and others that are on the mix. We are in negotiations with India for what's called an early progress trading agreement. I call it dating. We're just agreeing to date. It shouldn't take so long to agree to date. We're not getting married. We're not living together. We're just simply agreeing to date, and we need to get on with that. I want to acknowledge the efforts of Minister Goel and our Trade Minister Mary Ng, for really carrying the ball on this, because there are obstacles. There are obstacles to doing these trade deals, including protectionism, including politics, and so forth. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about the diaspora, because I know MR and Sanjeev and others, this is what Indiaspora is all about. The word aspora is in it for a reason. It is about the diaspora. And my message on the diaspora when it comes to economics and when it comes to trade is that it's a double-edged sword. Sure, there are tremendous advantages to having the linkages from one nation to another or one region to another. Obviously, it helps to know the culture, to know the language, to have family, to understand the nuances, to understand the history. Those are strategic assets and strategic advantages. It's effectively know your customer. So clearly you know your customer if you are the customer, if you have been Indian or you are Indian and you understand the market. So tremendous opportunities. But here's the candid part. In democracies, the diaspora politics can run a lot of interference. And so whether they're mischief-making agendas by some communities or some organizations, or whether there are legitimate beefs and legitimate complaints that countries are maybe having or the diaspora may be having, I wish they would take it home. You want to fight a fight, go back to your country and fight that fight. But unfortunately, it happens in our home countries. And what it does is it mucks up our politics, and it mucks up our trading agreements, and it gets in the way of progress to happen. So my message here in India, and to my colleagues in Canada, is don't take the bait. Don't fall prey to those with the agenda to actually disrupt the positive relationships that exist between our people, between our economies, between our societies, and between our countries. Because if you can't make India and Canada's relationship work, whose relationship do you think you're going to make work? You won't find, I mean, we're globally branded as nice, by the way, in Canada, right? If not Canada and India, who? And so we've got to make sure that we are the poster child for what it means for two democracies who believe in democracy, who believe in trade, who believe in multilateralism, who believe in multiculturalism, are going to make an example of what the possibilities are when you get it right. And so I'm an optimist by nature. Most of the CEOs you'll ever speak to see half glass full and not half glass empty. And so I think when it comes to the diversification strategy that Canada is deploying, we call it the Indo-Pacific. Let's be honest, we're saying that because we don't want to mention China, but we can't not mention China. It is not Russia. You can get up and leave Russia on the weekend, but you cannot do that to China. We have to figure out how to work with China. And obviously when China's the influence in the region that it does, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership you referenced is 30% of global trade, 30% of global population, largest trade agreement in the history of man. Okay, so we can't discount what's going on here. But we know this much. Any road or pathway to the Indo-Pacific must go through India. There is no way you can be in the Indo-Pacific and avoid India. So I think this is a moment where India can really take herself literally to the moon and to the next level if it doesn't get in its own way, if it learns from its history, if it opens its doors to trade, is less protectionist, and continues to promote democracy, rule of law, social cohesion. There's no stopping her, and Canada just wants our fair share and our part of it, and I look forward to seeing that happen in my lifetime. Thank you.
And great points, Goldie. And it's interesting and ironic that India and the US are not in either of these trade agreements. But even so, as you said, the future will have to go through India in many, many ways. Your comments on protectionism was very interesting. Again, it's a paradox that democracies have a hard time with free trade agreements because of the inherent protectionism many groups in countries. So these are things that democracies have to work with. So let me move on to my friend, Mohammed Altaf, Dr. Altaf.
Thank you, Arun. Good morning, and I should start by saying thank you to Indiaspora for, it's a great honor and privilege to share this stage with Arun. I remember a few years ago when I went to Washington, D.C., I was just one among the many in the audience, investors from around the world who really listened to him when he was laying down the policies for Obama administration's trade and investment. Thank you. I represent a very unique region, and you're all familiar with GCC because Middle East actually represent MENA region. It's quite unique in terms of its relationship and the profile of the diaspora in our countries. So if you look at majority, there are countries like Qatar and Bahrain and Kuwait where for every Qatari you have 2 Indians. So we outnumber, we are almost double, without ever making them feel intimidated or overwhelmed with our presence. So that's a kind of gentle presence that Indian diaspora has in the Gulf. And companies like ours are also very different. We had a humble origin in a coastal village in Kerala. Then we went to the Gulf. We are there, all our GCC countries right now. And profile of our people are also very different. 70% of the people working in the Gulf are unskilled, semi-skilled, or maybe skilled. About 20% of the people we have there, they are in the middle management, CEO level, entrepreneurs, academicians, and 10% of the people are actually entrepreneurs. Now this matters quite a lot for our region. If you look at now, India is the second largest trade partner for GCC countries after China, and the gap is narrowing year by year. And if you look at numbers last year by Dubai Chamber of Commerce, at least 100,000 companies owned by Indians got registered only in Dubai Chamber of Commerce. And 30% of the startup in the region can trace their origin to India. So that's an immense opportunity. And this also shows the kind of relationship that we enjoy with the region. And if you look at the remittance again, even today, even post-COVID, it is about 30% of the total remittance of that we received in India. And India received close to 100 billion, I think, last year. And it's 30 billion has come from the Gulf. And this 2023 and 24, they are predicted to be again going up. And this has got huge macroeconomic impact in India. So this money is actually going to your villages. This money is going to take people out of poverty, send kids to school. Though it's not just any other FDI that is coming to this country. So that is the kind of importance that region holds for us. On the other side of the trade, Indian products, Indian companies always had easy market access in the Gulf. If you look at, these are the only countries in the world where horticulture products from India can just access the market if we just go by some of their regulatory requirements. And for GCC, India is one of the key role that we play there in their food security. And for the region, for India, for the energy security, I think they turn out to be very reliable partners. So that is the kind of relationship that we enjoy. And politically, although these are not democracies in our sense of the term, but we also have a lot of political influence in policy in the Gulf. And fortunately, always the relationships were very good, but politically, Middle East, the Gulf was taken for granted by a lot of our previous governments, maybe because things were very good, we had no crisis or issues there. But in recently, we should give credit to Modi administration that, the relationship got really deepened. We had so many back-to-back agreements, back to travel. I think Prime Minister Modi happened to be in the region at least 5 times in UAE, 3 times in Saudi Arabia, once in Qatar. And in 35 years, he was, this is something stunning. In 35 years, he was the first head of state, first Prime Minister from India to visit UAE. This could actually come as a surprise for a lot of people, And he used to say that we have 30 flights every day from India to Dubai, and it took 30 years for one Prime Minister actually to go to that region. So if you look at now, India, Dubai, I mean, everyone has mentioned relationship and special agreements. But if you look at what UAE has come and the kind of agreements that we have in place, strategically, Israel, UAE, India corridor, Saudi, India corridor, they're all getting very active. India is now a darling of all the sovereign funds. Yesterday, I think Qatar Investment Authority announced 1 billion into Reliance Retail. Probably this is the largest retail investment, the largest investment they made into a retail company after their investment into Harrods and into Sainsbury's a few years ago. So this is the kind of priority this region has. And one more thing I would like to mention that, a lot of people think that, because of all what is happening in the Gulf in terms of the construction projects and progress, maybe Indian skills are not needed anymore at the level they were required before. But I think, if you look at the strategy that they have, most of these countries are getting automated. They are investing in deep technology. They are partners of the major technology companies around the world. And that is where Indian companies can start their second innings in the Gulf. So I think the future is quite bright for a relationship between these two countries. And, and always the Gulf people, always Arab people used to believe that Indian culture, we were always there. And they believed that, our politically, we were non-intrusive. We never went there to preach to people. We never asked, we never challenged their social systems, their customs, or their form of governance. As long as our people were safe, secure, and they could work and make a living, we were always happy. And GCC never mind Indian policies. Even when they had very hostile relationship with Iran and with each other, GCC never bothered about India's special relationship they enjoyed with Iran. Today with Russia, North Korea. They don't mind as long as we don't interfere in their policies. And I think the relationship is getting deepened. We had Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, when he was a deputy head, Emir, he came to India as the guest of our Republic Day. And our administration really amended the protocol because it is only meant for heads of state. And he was the first one. He was not, he was a de facto head of state at that time. But still, so this is the kind of relationship that these countries enjoy today. I want all the investors come there. And if you come, I'm sure you all went to Dubai, but there are many other cities in Gulf which are equally Indian. Their food, the primary, if you look at the food is Indian, the customs, movies, so we are hugely popular. Indian soft power is actually in action. I learned to speak better Hindi after I went to the Gulf. so that's the thing. Thank you.
Great comments, Altaf. In fact, my fund and two of my partners here, Sudhir and Sriram right up there. We believe in this, the value that the Middle East can add to our focus on the US-India corridor. I mean, it's such a natural node in the US-India corridor, and we're very focused on that. The other thing about the Middle East is the alliance that's forming called the I2U2. Israel, India, UAE, and the US. It is an analog to the Quad in the Indo-Pacific. And again, it's a very interesting development. So we are kind of running out of time. So what I'll do is we'll just take maybe 2 or 3 questions, and then we'll just wrap up. Any questions or comments from the audience? Yes, Nishi.
One thought I have for Indiaspora is now a global institution. We should do some study and come up with thought leadership paper on harmonization of immigration laws. I'm a lawyer, by the way. Immigration is a worse form of protectionism and against human right. Okay, if you go back to the theory. So I think we should take a lead in creating harmonized system of immigration. Of course, you want to keep only one class of people out, and that is bad actors. The rest of it should move around the world freely, and human rights include not only physical human rights, but also right to prosper. That is the new thinking, and that is what we should be working on. If we can, as a global body, come up with some harmonized way of dealing with immigration, I think it is very, very useful. Today, somebody sitting on an immigration window has all the power, and you're presumed guilty fundamentally, how can democracy say that you are presumed guilty? This is completely nonsense, in my view. My respectful submission on that. Sorry for that.
Great point. Yeah.
Can I just ask, can I just pick up?
Sure, go ahead.
Canada is probably one of the most open countries in the world when it comes to immigration. But I will tell you, from a business perspective, what we're looking for is labor mobility. The ease of labor to be able to move from one market to another is going to be critical in a supply chain reorientation that's taking place around the world here. So I couldn't agree with you more, but we also know politics gets in the way of this issue, right? What's the biggest issue that's used to divide people in a country? Immigration.
You know, India has been putting mobility on the table in many of its conversations with other governments. The credit of the Indian government, they've not shied away from putting that. Yes.
Yeah, Pradeep Mehta, I'm a trade policy expert. Continuing from what Nishit spoke about, we have been arguing for a trade visa so that we don't get confused with immigration, and that is where the problem comes. Secondly, Arun, more importantly, is the issue about totalization agreement, which emerges from this problem about export of workers. Now, India will continue to be a major country exporting brains and workers, skilled workers. This is one of our competitive advantages. And that will continue to happen. And therefore, for us to have a totalization agreement with US, UK is very important. In US, something like $8 billion of Indian money is lying there. And US refuses to talk about it, saying that, look, our laws cannot change. Of course, your laws can change if there is an agreement to do that. If it is not your money, it is the money belonging to Indian workers, it should be sent back. It should be... With 10 countries at least, we have a totalization agreement. With UAE, for example, we have a totalization agreement. This is, again, I mean, when you talk in terms of immigration, this is very important to understand that, we are looking at India as an exporter of human capital, and Arun, you're right. In every agreement, India insists on movement of natural persons, what we call MNP. It's a very major demand that we have. And quite often it is, it is a block, but still we are able to succeed. There is gravity. Gravity itself, leads to a lot of export of workers.
See, I think in international negotiations,
right, often
keeping on putting it on the table, eventually you get to make progress. So that's really the way to go, because it's, I've been on the negotiations on the totalization.
No, but I mean, if Indiaspora could take up the issue of totalization, which will help the...
I think the mobility issue is a really good one for Indiaspora to take up. I think I'm going to close this meeting because we've run out of time. Let me close on something that Goldie said. He said, this is India's moment. And I really believe that, Tim, you talked about historical underperforming, which every country has felt that, and India has felt that it's underperformed in trade. But I do believe we are moving towards India's moment. And I can tell you, I was in June, I was at the luncheon at the State Department that the Vice President and Secretary of State hosted for Prime Minister Modi. And I was the same luncheon in 2014 when Prime Minister Modi made his first visit as Prime Minister. And I can tell you that the sense of conviction and the sense of optimism was incredible this time. The first time around, it was a sense of tentativeness. We've kind of seen this movie before. Is it going to be the same movie? This time, I must tell you that there was just a lot of confidence. There was a lot of genuine feeling of friendship among everybody I talked to that day. So I do think if this is not India's moment, it's coming close. And I think all of us in the diaspora have a big role to play. And I want to wrap up by thanking MR and Sanjeev and Sri for wonderful work they've done in pulling this together. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you to that panel for kicking us off today with a reminder of the geographic range and profile differences which we refer to when we use the term diaspora. I'm Shobha Vishwanathan, Indiaspora Senior Director of Development and Civic Engagement, and I'm based in New York. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Indiaspora member Carl Mehta. Carl is a serial entrepreneur, author, investor, engineer, philanthropist, and civil servant with more than 30 years of experience in founding, building, and funding high-tech companies in the US and international markets. Carl was the founder and CEO of an artificial intelligence-powered knowledge cloud platform, EdCast Inc., which was backed by Stanford University and acquired by Cornerstone Inc. He was also a former venture partner at Menlo Ventures, a leading Silicon Valley firm with more than $6 billion under management. In 2011, Carl established the Mehta Trust, his family office for philanthropy and investments in early-stage tech companies and venture capital funds in Silicon Valley. While there is much more to share about Carl's illustrious track record, what I'd like to spotlight today is Carl Mehta's role as chairman of the Quad Investors Network. Arun referenced it earlier. The Quad Investors Network is an independent consortium supported by the governments of Australia, India, Japan, and the United States. And Carl was appointed to his role by the White House in 2022. Continuing on our theme of exploring multilateral connections and opportunities, Carl's talk is about innovations and investments to strengthen the Quad. Welcome, Carl.
All right, thanks, Shobha, and thanks everyone for joining this morning. Indiaspora has become a great unifying platform for the diaspora, so I want to really thank MR and the Indiaspora team for putting this conference together. So my name is Carl Mehta. I'm the chairman of Quad Investors Network. It's a great pleasure to be here in New Delhi and talk about a little bit about what Quad Innovation Forum is doing. So in the fourth industrial revolution, national security is more than just a military or a defense alliance. So as you know, that the Quad was formed almost a decade ago by late Prime Minister Abe Shinzo, and it was, and it still continues to be a military and a defense alliance. But the larger need in the Indo-Pacific that we heard is in twofold. Number one is to be able to secure the leadership in strategic, advanced, critical, and emerging technologies against other players in the region. And second, we have to build a resilient supply chain in many of these technologies as we see concentration risks, and we've all experienced it during COVID. So with that background, the Quad Investors Network was announced at the Leaders Summit in Tokyo last year by President Biden and his counterparts. So we are on the precipice of a new wave of innovations and in frontier technology, especially in semiconductors, quantum information sciences, in clean energy, critical minerals, biotech, health security, cybersecurity, AI, and so forth and so on. The nation or the nations that will lead in this critical and emerging technologies will set the standard for global leadership and prosperity. So I also represent America's Frontier Fund, so I'll give a little bit background on AFF and then how it leads into the Quad Investors Network. So America's Frontier Fund was established as the United States' first nonprofit investment platform focused on building frontier tech hubs for a safer and more prosperous America. Our aim at AFF is to make the United States as the best place in the world for innovators to build and scale next wave of frontier technologies. Despite leading the world for better of the last half century, we recognize that the United States was risking in falling behind in key technologies race because our innovation base was no longer working to effectively commercialize and scale frontier technologies for two main reasons. Number one, we offshored our advanced manufacturing base. We all know about that, how much Arun talked about it in terms of manufacturing moving to lower labor cost markets. So we offshored our advanced manufacturing base, breaking the very important connection between research and development and manufacturing. So that was the first risk. And the second is the venture capital system became overweighted towards more software and neglected the hard technologies. So we all see the dependency on hardware in some geographies. So there's a reason for optimism, though. The US government has risen to the challenge and has authorized more than $20 billion, which is further matched by the state and the local governments. This money is being funded across national technology hubs to be built across the United States. Now, the US is not alone in this situation, so other countries in the Indo-Pacific has exactly the same challenge. And so the Quad Investor Network has a similar mission as the AFF, albeit more of an external focus rather than internal focus to the US, which is to advance this access to capital for critical and emerging technologies within and across the four Quad nations by facilitating co-investments, joint initiatives, research, collaboration, developments, and policy development. So Quinn, which is my organization, is the premier forum for leading individuals and organizations across India, Australia, Japan, and the United States to deliver outcomes by identifying strategic investments and joint initiatives in priority areas. The Quinn will also drive hyper-collaboration between Quad Plus nations. There's a term being used now, which is Quad Plus, that includes many of the friendly and the trusted nations in the Indo-Pacific outside of the 4 countries. And we've identified 10 technologies that we are focusing on both for leadership as well as for the supply chain. Number one, semiconductors. As you all know, the more than 60% of concentration risk in particular geographies for semiconductors. Second, in quantum information sciences, where although the United States is the innovator in most of the quantum technologies, it's China that is further ahead in quantum communications. They already tested the links, quantum communication links between Beijing and Shanghai. We haven't done that here in the US, as well as in any of the other Quad nations. Third, and by the way, it's not in any particular order of priority. Third, mobility in 5G, 6G, Open RAN, AI, cybersecurity, biotech and health security, clean energy, critical minerals, fintech, workforce development. I think a lot was talked about that in this conference. Food security, very important. And then space tech and defense tech. We saw the landing on the moon. India is at an inflection point with space tech. Same thing is happening in the United States and other countries. So our objective in each of the sectors will be to identify key projects that are cross-border. So it has to cover all the 4 nations. In the nature of technology needs, capital needs, government policy, regulatory needs, and help to fast-track them by bringing our member institutions and governments and also venture capital and academia as partners. To that end, Quad Investors Network we're initially focused on 3 primary outputs or outcomes. Number one, we are creating virtual technology center of excellence. We just launched a center of excellence for quantum information sciences, where we have the principal scientific advisor to the Prime Minister here in India, Dr. Ajay Kumar Sood, and his counterpart, the Chief Scientist of Australia, Dr. Kathy Foley, as the co-chair of our quantum information sciences. And we have the leading scientists, academia, research, and private companies, private sector companies like Google's and the IBM's, who are involved in quantum technologies in the part of this building up this center of excellence. So that's a concrete example of things that we're working on. We are launching a similar COE in semiconductors and clean energy and critical minerals this year, and early next year we'll be launching in biotech and health security. So, and the other thing we are driving is co-investment opportunity. So strategic transactions that can include technology startups, mainly more scale-ups than startups, sorry. Supply chain deals that addresses specifically the supply chain constraints and bottlenecks that we see, or the choke points in some of those 10 technologies that I mentioned. And we're already pursuing some deals, large-scale deals in clean energy and critical minerals, for example, in Australia, Japan, India, and the US. So our ultimate objective are to ensure that the Quad leadership in critical and emerging technologies and building a resilient supply chain that is based on the principles of free and open Indo-Pacific. It is extremely important that we get this right, especially as other countries seek to establish their own technological dominance and undermine the international rule of law, and which has ensured security and prosperity for much part of the century post the World War II. So we look forward to working closely with all the key players in India. It's great to be here in India. Your participation and contribution in any one of this critical and emerging tech will be super important, and it'll be critical if we are to rise to this occasion, to a very historic moment in the history. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak. If we have time, I'm happy to take questions. I don't know how much time we have, because I think we are running late on time. So, all right.
Address questions in the audience offline, maybe?
All right, perfect. Sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you to Carl and the panel that preceded him. It's been a great start to the morning. Lot of thought-provoking content. I now want to introduce our next speaker, Vikas Chaudhary. Vikas is the founder and managing partner of Playbook Partners, an operator-driven growth venture capital platform for digital transformation in India. He has been a leader in several multinational public companies and operated and invested in several billion-dollar businesses. In his immediate past, he was the president of Reliance Jio, India's largest conglomerate, and he led the team of India's largest digital platform, including e-commerce, fintech, media, and telecom. He has a storied background prior to that as well, but I won't go into it all because I know that you'd much rather hear from Vikas directly than from me. So Vikas, please come on.
Good morning, everyone. Great to see all of you here. Thank you so much for having me, MR, Sanjeev, and the rest of the Indiaspora team. It's a privilege to be here, on this sort of occasion on the sidelines of the G20. Great occasion for India to sort of fly the India flag, if you will. I'll give you a little bit of a backstory that Sanjeev was talking about. While we just get the clicker, right? We'll just wait for that. Okay, awesome. So let me tell you a little bit of the, most of you will be quite familiar with the Jio story, but let me tell you 2 or 3 statistics that might not be as obvious out there in the media, if you will. So 2 or 3 things. Jio launched in about 2016 as the first greenfield 4G telecom network in India. It was actually the 14th telecom provider that went in at a point in time where there were already 1 billion mobile phones in our country. So it was arguably saturated. But despite all of that and being connected on the phone, India was actually one of the data darkest countries in the world. And why I say that is because of the 1 billion people, there were less than 5 million people who were on 4G on smartphones, which means that they were truly connected to the internet. And what we could achieve, and we're very thankful for that, for the country and not just for the company, is in 5 years we took India from 5 million 4G smartphones to 500 million 4G smartphones. Right. We took India from being ranked 155 in the data consuming nations in the world to the #1 data consuming nation in the world. Jio alone carries more data traffic than all of United States put together. The second statistic that's very interesting is our per capita consumption of data was about 1 GB a month, right, per capita across the country. Today, 5 years out, now it's about 7 years out, but this happened about 5 years out, it's about 1 GB per day. So we went from 1 GB per month to 1 GB per day. And finally, there is an estimate which has been done that this has created tens of millions of jobs and influenced up to 1% of the GDP of our country and truly put us on the digital map of the country. So that's a little bit of the background of what we were very privileged to do and influence in the country. On the sides of Jio, I ran my own family office where you can see a bunch of these. If you're familiar with India, I had a deep conviction on the digital transformation of our country that I bet on. We did close to 100 investments over the last 10 odd years, and I've just stepped out and started a fund using some of this that we've been able to see. So I'm going to use not just the Jio experience, but really the Startup India experience, which I think has taught me more than anything else. These 100 entrepreneurs over 10 years, 10 unicorns, IPOs, exits that have emerged from this entire portfolio. That has helped me, take a step back, think at a 30,000 feet level as to where is the world going and how can we play a part in that transformation. So I'm going to share with you just what I think there are sort of 7 mega trends, if you will. This is, bear with me, this is my own thinking, so don't hold me to this. And I'll give you one example on each one of them. Globally, what's happening? And then, of course, India is very connected to global, as we all are here. I'll give you some examples on India for the same pieces, right? So let me start with the first one. The future is clearly digital, but if you don't believe that, the future is definitely different, at the very least. The first paradigm shift that's happening is that there is ecosystem domination happening in the business world in every single facet of the industry or geography. What you see here is essentially the S&P 500, and the top 5 companies in the world or on the S&P 500 are equal to the market cap of the bottom 282 companies on the S&P 500. So that is how dominant some of the top players in the world are today, and that is actually just foretelling what is going to happen in every aspect of business going forward. So you have to aspire to be, at the leadership end. The second is that, while there is deglobalization on physical supply chains, there is virtual globalization because of that simple mobile phone that all of us have in our pocket, and that's essentially become a device that truly takes you global. So the most, the oldest sort of instrument in the world, which is, money and finance, has become 100% digital. All our children will never see a bank, will never see a branch, will probably never even see cash a few years out from today. I've just put down here, Revolut, which is one of the biggest neobanks now in the world. In Europe, they have over 25 million customers, tens of billions of dollars of deposits. Your credit card is just a tap on your phone, as you will all be very familiar with, specifically with Apple Pay in the US. And incidentally, also, Apple has now become one of the top 3 financial institutions in the world because of accepting deposits, along with Goldman Sachs that they launched a few years ago. So that's just one example of how every business is basically becoming an app, right? That's really where the world is going. The third I'd like to talk about is there's true democratized opportunity in any and every business in the world. What you see here is Squid Game on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, I'd encourage you to see it if you're okay with with dark and gore. But what's interesting is this Korean drama that was bought by Netflix for $24 million, generated almost $1 billion in value. It is the #1 show that humanity has ever watched. 2 billion views of a Korean drama on Netflix. The next most watched thing is actually Bridgerton, which is the new English drama on Netflix, if you will. But guess what? What's interesting is this is 100% Korean in a language, or if you see the content of Squid Game, you just don't get it. But the world has watched this, so there's an opportunity there. Don't be afraid of where you are or what language you speak. I then want to talk about, everything is about scale at the speed of thought, right? And here's a game that a lot of us who belong to our vintage might not know, but most of our children will know. It's a game called the Pokemon, which was launched about 7-8 years ago. What's really interesting is in 80 days, this game had 500 million plus downloads and $500 million, which is $500 million in revenue. In 80 days, it came, veni vidi vici, right? It came, it conquered, it left. And that was the end of it. So if anybody has $1 billion idea that I can make in the next 90 days, I'm here for the rest of the day, happy to chat. The next one, what I call is frictionless experience, right? Businesses are essentially, and human-computer interaction is moving into frictionless experiences. And this is an example here, of a company called the Dollar Shave Club. What does every human or every male actually do every morning? Apologies for the political incorrectness. Is shave. But what you have to do is every few weeks you go out and try, and buy a new set of blades, right? They simply, pun intended, made that frictionless. They said, here's a subscription, subscribe to it on an app, every month we'll send you a bunch of blades. That was a simple idea. One simple idea. They became 15% of the US market, took it away from, from Gillette and the other players, and Unilever bought them for $1 billion in 5 years, right? On that simple frictionless idea. And the second last piece on this is what I call real-time decisioning. You do not have time to make decisions anymore. If you're sitting in a boardroom and doing quarterly reviews and quarterly meetings, your ancient history. And real-time as real-time gets, of course, all of us are familiar with the Tesla autopilot, which is out here. But really what's interesting is 8 cameras, 12 sensors are actually processing millions of miles every nanosecond, and it's actually 3.7 times safer to be sitting and getting driven by an autopilot than it is to be actually a human being driving a car, right? Because of the intelligence. And the last piece I want to talk about global, and then I'll very quickly take 2 minutes to give you India examples, because India is sort of just a few years, if you will, behind this, but we'll quickly leapfrog, is economics of outcomes, right? So what's happening is nobody cares about the time or the effort that you put in anymore. Everybody only cares about the outcome and wants to pay you as per the outcome. So again, the world's oldest industry, if you will, the heaviest engineering industry, which is Rolls-Royce, which manufactures aircraft engines that used to sell this for tens of millions of dollars, that transports us, has now moved to a model where more than 50% of Rolls-Royce engines are not sold. They're actually rented by every flying hour to airplanes around the world. So they are actually all just connected. All those aircraft engines are connected, and they're talking to each other while they're flying. They're assessing the damage control, danger, and they're essentially getting paid by the hour. They're no longer selling this. So it's about delivering the outcome. I fly you, you pay me, right? So let me use that. Those were sort of the 7 paradigms I think are going to shape the world going forward. And let me just bring it back home very quickly. 7 startups in India that are no longer actually startups that give you the same examples back home. Of course, we are all here because India's growth. There is no alternative, to India or for India, if you will. Ecosystem domination. One company, Policy Bazaar, went public. One of the first few companies that went public in the tech world last year, 2021. 93% of digital insurance market share in the country, right? 19 million policies. 25% of all life insurance sold in India today online is now sold on Policy Bazaar. The second is a company called Nazara, also one of the big tech companies that went public in the 2021 boom, if you will, on virtual globalization. 25% of their revenues comes from a game called Kidopia, which is the #2 edutainment game now in the world, teaching essentially kids, the basic language and math, using videos. On democratized opportunity, there's this company called Leverage EDU. Every Indian that can afford to go outside of India, today does want to go for education outside of India. This company does something very interesting. I was pleasantly surprised when I looked at them and invested in them. That they work with 650 universities in the world that actually pay Leverage EDU to send them students. Right? So if a student gets placed, so they actually provide the service for free. 8 million visitors every month. 15,000 students get placed through this company in universities across the world, and the university pays the company, right? Geo, we've talked a little bit about just scale at the speed of thought. I wanted to share one more statistic with you. We were the fastest acquisition of anything in the world. We acquired 100 million customers in the first 170 days of launch. We physically carded across the country 1 million SIM cards every single day in the first 170 days. And that's the scale at which you go and acquire. If we didn't do that, we would have failed as a company, right? That has now gotten us from 100 million to 450 million subscribers. But that first speed is really what took us and gave us success. From frictionless experience, another very interesting portfolio company, but what they did is they took a very simple asset class. Do you know the number one savings instrument in India? Anybody can guess the number one savings instrument in India? Oh, it's gold, right? It's biscuits and jewelry that lie in lockers in our country, over $10 trillion of gold. What they did was something very simple. They digitized frictionless that process. They put an app on your phone and they said every time you spend, let's say 77 rupees on Uber, they'll round it up and they'll take 23 rupees automatically and invest it in digital gold for you, right? This company, we invested at $10 million about a year and a half ago. Tiger just came in, put in $25 million at $300 million, 30x in 1.5 years. They've got 15 million customers, 20 transactions per month, over $100 million in AUM, becoming one of the fastest growing savings companies right, in the country. On that simple frictionless idea, right? Again, Fractal, India's largest unicorn in the AI analytics space. I won't say too much, but they now work with 100 out of the Fortune 500 in making real-time decisioning, both across services and products. I think the most interesting product that they do is called Cure.ai, where they look at automatically. AI looks at your scans, your MRIs and CTs, and predicts with 99.9% accuracy, better than a doctor, as to what your predictive disease could be. And lastly, economics of outcomes. Rapido is a bike sharing company in India. They are 3 times the size of an Uber, 1 million rides a day, and they don't do cars. They only do bikes. So you're sitting on the back of someone and getting ridden for 7 rupees a kilometer. But the reality is they have millions of these riders who are waiting on literally roadside corners, waiting to pick you up and take you. And then for the ride they charge you 7 rupees per kilometer. That's it. I think what works really well for India is our unique blend, which I call operator capital, right? I think we are entrepreneurs, we're hustlers, we try and take global trends, we bring sort of the India masala that we add to it, and we create our own future. Thank you.
Wow, we saw Chandrayaan last night, A.R. Rahman after that, 500 million cell phones. But I'll tell you this, behind all these stories, there are tough times, tough challenges. That's the part we don't see. We saw Chandrayaan landing. We didn't see all the blood, sweat, and tears and the failures behind it. We saw A.R. Rahman's success. We didn't see all the stuff he was agonizing and going through, right? Our next speaker really will address those issues head on. Imagine this, you have a child, and the child has a dreaded disease and passes away. How do you deal with that as a very successful business executive? How do you do that? I mean, Niren, who's going to come up and speak, was the CEO of a company, and he's dealing with this personally. How do you do that? Where's Aditi? Where's Aditi? Aditi had to deal with that. How do people deal with this yet run their lives? It's resilience. It's overcoming these challenges. And so, Niren and I have known each other for a while, and he was visiting Delhi, and I said, you have to come and talk about the other side of life, not just the success, but the anguish, the dealing with difficulties, and how do you overcome it? We all have had these challenges ourselves. My father died when I was 10 years old. I had to deal with that myself. So we all have these things, but we never speak about it, and we never heal others in terms of us divulging what we go through. So without further ado, I really want Niren to come up and take the stage. Niren, please come up.
So good morning. It's a real pleasure to be here. MR, thank you very much. Sanjeev and the entire Diaspora team really appreciate the opportunity. I'm going to talk to you about leadership and resilience. What does leadership mean? And as MR alluded, what does resilience mean? I really think that leadership is indeed a privilege. I think all of us in this room are leaders, and it's really, think about it, it's a privilege to lead other people. And I believe that the responsibility of leaders is to be force multipliers for good, which means that enterprise value creation is the outcome of doing the right things the right way. And by the right things, I mean that as leaders, we have the responsibility to unlock the dreams of the people who work with us. We have the responsibility to serve the communities in which we operate. We have the responsibility to protect the planet that we inhabit. The end result of all of this is sustainable enterprise value creation. That is my belief. To be able to do that, I think that leaders need to be able to build trust. And to build trust with those around us, we need consistent behaviors. We trust those who are consistent, who show up in the same consistent manner, consistency of behaviors. And if consistency of behavior is what drives trust, then the question is, what drives behavior? So let me share with you the metaphor of a tree. So have a look at this tree, and the leaves that you see are the outward manifestation of our behaviors that everybody around us can see. That's what is visible to people. However, the trunk of the tree are the thoughts that drive those behaviors. And interestingly, what drives our thoughts are the roots that nobody can see, that are our values and our core beliefs. So this is how it connects for me. Our values and our core beliefs shape our thoughts shape our behaviors create habits, our habits form character, and character then unlocks destiny. And that's how I see this whole thing connected, that if leadership is about establishing trust, the only way then to get consistent behavior that underpins a trustworthy character is to have clarity of our values and beliefs. So if that is true, the question is, where do we accumulate our values and beliefs from? And I think, as all of us know, it comes from our upbringing, our parents, our childhood, our school, our universities, what we read, the company we keep, our spiritual journey, and most importantly, the experiences that we go through in life shape us. Now, very often, I think we may or may not audit our core values. So I just want to ask this room with a show of hands, how many of us are aware of our top 4 values and can articulate that straight away? So maybe about 10% of the room. The rest are perhaps quite tired and couldn't be bothered to raise their hands. What kind of stupid question is that? But I think it'll become clear why this is not a stupid question. Because of course we have values, we all know that, that's pretty obvious. However, we may not be spending time auditing our values and saying, am I carrying the right values that are shaping my thoughts and behaviors and shaping my character? And periodically, am I letting go of those disempowering values and embracing empowering values that can shape my character into what I wish it to be? So think about that. And tonight, as homework, whenever you have a glass of wine, alcohol, or non-alcoholic drink, reflect and just think about what are your core values, because if there's one thing I want you to take away, it is that your clarity of values is paramount to be able to define your thoughts, consistency of behavior, your character, which will then help unlock destiny. So here are my 4 values. First value is courage, and by For me, courage means focusing on what I can control, not what's happening to me. Second value that I have is of gratitude, being grateful for what I have and not focusing on what I have lost. The third value is one of congruence, that whatever I think, feel, say, or do must be congruent at all times. I must have one face for people, to their face and behind their back. I must be congruent. And finally, resilience is my core value, that every time I get hammered and I fall down, I will get up. I'll get hammered, I'll fall down, I will get up one more time. I can't help being struck, I can't help falling down, but I can help getting up and being the very best version of who I can be. Those are my 4 values, and I think a good time to reflect on what are your 4 values, 5 values that define who you are, and you can choose empowering values. You're not born with values, it's what you accumulate, but that will define who you are. So let me share with you my most profound life experience that has shaped who I am, has been the loss of my daughter, Aisha. Aisha died in 2015 when she was just 18 years old. And she was a wise old soul in that very young body. And her story is not one of despair and sadness of a young life that passed prematurely, but her story is one of a young woman who lived her life so well. She achieved more in her 18 years than many of us achieve in a lifetime. So she's an inspirational TED Talk speaker. I don't know if you've heard of her, but she's got many talks on YouTube. She is a best-selling author of a book called My Little Epiphanies on Amazon. Recently, a movie in Bollywood was inspired by her called The Sky is Pink. It's on Netflix. I don't know if you've seen it, but I would recommend a watch. And then finally, we've also released a documentary that honors her and inspires other parents and children who may be going through a similar journey. The documentary is called Black Sunshine Baby, and it's also on Netflix. She achieved so much, touched so many lives, and she will touch you this afternoon as I speak of her. Her story is one of courage. Her story is one of gratitude. Her story is one of deep inherent resilience and the importance of serving others. And that's what I want to share with you, and that's what has shaped my values of courage, of gratitude, of service. So on courage, Aisha talks about in her book, My Little Epiphanies, pick the highest mountain to climb on and the dullest of the days to shine on. Meaning that when times are tough, that's when we need to step back and pick a new mountain to climb on, a new challenge to go after, and then do our very best to climb that mountain. And fulfillment lies not in achieving the peak of that mountain, but in the endeavor of pursuing your new challenge. And she did that by focusing on what she had control over, not what was happening to her, and that's what I call the real, true definition of courage. So let me share some stories about Aisha. Aisha is 13 years old. We've just discovered that she has this terminal illness called pulmonary fibrosis. She has only 5 years to live, and it's like a death sentence. And absolutely crushed me and my wife at this devastating news. And that time, TED India calls me up and says, would you like to come and speak on leadership to a group of about 200-300 people? I said, no, I've just heard this incredibly difficult news. I don't think I can get up and speak. I can barely handle this emotionally. And they said, well, would Aisha like to speak? Aisha was 13 years old. I said, Aisha, she is so small and she's so shy. She can barely speak to 5 people, but I'll go and ask her. So I go to Aisha and say, Aisha, would you like to speak at TED? She said, what the hell is that? I said, well, it's a stage and you get to speak to about 200-300 people. She said, Dad, what's wrong with you? I can barely speak to 5 people. I don't want to speak to 200-300 people. Why would I want to do that? And then she said, her eyes lit up and said, is TED the same thing that Bhaiya thinks is very cool? You know how it is between brothers and sisters? I says, yes, it is. She says, then I may think about it. Will Bhaiya think it's very cool? I said, yes. She said, okay. Dad, I don't think I can, and therefore I must. 13 years old. I don't think I can, and therefore I must. So she goes away and she rehearses and practices and rehearses and practices some more. I'm going to show you a little clip from her first speech. Remember, she's only 13 years old. We told her that you have, the doctors say you have a very dire medical prognosis. She didn't quite comprehend it. I told her as a father, I will find the cure for you, wherever it is, anywhere in the world. So she hadn't quite comprehended it. So here you see her speaking at 13 in front of about 200-300 people.
So as we now know, there's always something in life to sing about, something to be grateful for. I'm grateful for my loving family, my friends, my dogs. In fact, I'm even grateful for the challenges that life has thrown at me, for which I've experienced life with a much greater intensity than I would have otherwise. And I do believe that my soul would have no rainbow if my eyes had no tears. Thank you for listening.
My soul would have no rainbow if my eyes had no tears. Remarkable wisdom from 13-year-old Aisha, who spoke and absolutely lit up the crowd, similar to this one, and people were up on their feet and giving her a standing applause, and Aisha was running off the stage, and I had to grab her and said, Aisha, where are you going? She says, I said, they're honoring you, there's a standing ovation. She said, what's that? I said, they're saying it's very good. She said, oh, I thought they were very bored and they wanted to leave. I said, no. So then she said, okay, and she said, was it that good? I said, it was absolutely unbelievable. The disease progresses. It's a very, very cruel disease, and now Aisha can no longer walk. She's on a wheelchair. And she says to her mom, she's not focused on I can't walk. She says, I can still move my hands. That's her focus. I can still breathe. My mind is still active. And she says to her mom, Mom, I love school, but I can't be there. And I can't, I get very tired. So I want to reduce the number of subjects I take. I still want to do maths. She was a bit of a nerd. I'd want to do maths. But you know what? I think I want to do painting. I said, Aditi said, why? She said, there's something magical about this whole process of dipping your paint and expressing your emotion on a blank canvas. It is so therapeutic. So I would love to do it. So off she went, a new mountain to climb on, and then endeavor to be the very best that you can be when times are tough by focusing on the fact that I can still move my hands even though I can't stand up and I can't walk. So have a look at her collection of paintings. And remember, she went from not painting anything to doing all this work in the span of a year.
First things first, I'm the realest. Drop this and let the whole world feel it. Let them feel it. And I'm still in the murder business. I can hold it down like I'm giving lessons in physics. Right. You should want a bad bitch like this. Drop it low and pick it up just like this. Yeah. You should want a bad bitch like this. Drop it low and pick it up just like this. Yeah. You should want a bad bitch like this. Drop it low and pick it up just like this. Yeah. Drop it low and pick it up just like this. Drop it low and pick it up just like this. Yeah. You should want a bad bitch like this.
What do you think? Pretty amazing, right? And as you tell, there's a common theme in what she paints. She paints dogs. So she loved her two dogs. And she paints them all the time, her pug and our lab. And of course, she paints my beautiful wife. She's here in person. You can see her, and that's her on the screen. And I went to Aisha feeling quite lost, and I said, Aisha, I'm feeling left out. I had a bit of FOMO. Where's your father in all this, Aisha? You paint your dogs. You know, you paint beagles, you paint everything, and your mom, and what about me? And she said, Dad, I only paint beautiful people. The fact that you're all laughing, I think you kind of concur. So she always had a great way, you know, especially showing her father where his true place was. The disease progressed further, and now she was actually on full-time oxygen. She could no longer breathe. Her hands were working, but her legs were not. She could not stand up, and she's getting weaker by the day. And Ted called again and said, Aisha, you were a superstar the last time. Can you come back and speak again? And she said, are you crazy? I mean, just look at me. I'm on oxygen. How will I speak? But then again, her eyes lit up, and I said, oh, here we go again. Pick another mountain to climb on. And she said, Dad, you know what? On one condition, if I am allowed to speak without my oxygen mask. I said, Aisha, you're on 24/7 oxygen. How can you do that? She says, that's my condition. Now, if I just ask you to just hold your breath for a second, just take a deep breath, hold it, and then try and speak. It's impossible. That's what her condition was. She could not breathe. But she said, that's my condition. I don't want to be on a wheelchair. I don't want to be with an oxygen mask, you know, climbing up on stage and everyone saying, oh, poor little girl. I don't want people to see the outward manifestation of my illness. I want people to see the real me, Aisha, who I am. I said, okay, there she goes again. She's another mountain to climb on. I said, okay, Aisha, you know, if that's what you want, fair enough. So then she went like an athlete and trained for endurance of her muscles to survive without oxygen. Walked on my treadmill slowly with her oxygen, took it off for 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, finally 10 minutes, taking off her oxygen mask and speaking till she was able to do it. And then she went and spoke, and I will show you this video. You will see that she's sitting down because she no longer stands. She doesn't have the energy to stand. And you can see she's getting breathless, her nostrils are flaring. But her spirit is strong. And her mind is immaculate. So listen to this next speech.
So happiness is an attitude. Happiness is doing what you truly love. And I feel that happiness can only come from acceptance. I accept who I am. And I accept where I'm at. And I accept the challenges that I'm battling with today. And I'm even more determined to make the most of this wonderful gift of life that God has given me. As Anderson once said, enjoy life. There's plenty of time to be dead.
Anderson once said, enjoy life, everybody. Enjoy life. There's plenty of time to be dead. Right? The time that we have is right now such a gift. And she had such innate wisdom. The disease got worse, and now she could not even sit. She was lying in bed, and we knew that the end was near. She's lying in bed, 24/7 oxygen. She's, becoming thinner and thinner, unable to eat and really thrive. And she's getting very bored. She tells Aditi, Mom, what am I supposed to do? I'm so bored. We watched Friends, we watched Breaking Bad, we watched everything there is to watch on Netflix. I'm super bored and all my friends are away. What am I supposed to do? Just hang around here, just lie down here? So Aditi said, why don't you read a book? She said, like what? She said, read Hugh Prather's Notes to Myself. Has anybody read that book? Oh, you have? That's amazing. What an erudite audience. I was going to suggest to the rest of you, don't read it. That's what Aisha would say. But it's a very uniquely written book and was very successful. Aisha reads it, chucks it, and says, I can do better than this. I said, oh, man, this is like, she goes off again. There's another new mountain. I said, what do you mean, Aisha? She says, Dad, I can write better than this. I have better thoughts than this. I said, what do you mean? She said, I have lots of insights and epiphanies, and I think I can write better. I said, okay, thinking, let's see what she does. And away she went, a new mountain to climb on, focus on what I can do. My fingers still work. My legs don't, my lungs don't, my back doesn't, but my fingers do. I can still read and my mind is active. And she takes her iPhone and she's typing away. Before I know it, she has 5,000 words. And a book is released. It's called My Little Epiphanies in the last 3 months of her life. A collection of all her musings and thinking of life in all its incredible glory, from heartbreak to love, from hope to despondency, and everything in between. And I'll share with you an interview that was taken just a few days before she passed away, where she talked about what this book meant to her.
And what is the message you want to tell the world?
I think basically everyone's just fighting their own battles together, and we're all on a roller coaster ride. And mine's been going particularly down this year, and I felt so stuck, and so writing this book has really uplifted me, and so I wanted my readers to find peace on whatever roller coaster ride they may be on. So I hope that's what will happen.
Thank you, Aisha.
Thank you.
So if you haven't read this book called My Little Epiphanies, I would recommend to read. I think it's very, very powerful. Many people keep it by their bedside table, and you can just open it up and it'll give you some inspiration, some hope, some perspective. So that was courage, which is focus on what we have control over, not what's happening to us. We can't help what's happening to us, but we can really help how we react to what's happening to us. The second thing that she talks about is the importance of gratitude. And she wrote this. Think of her that she's lying in bed knowing that the end is near. She can barely move, she can barely walk, she can barely breathe, and she writes in her book, I'm blessed to have my ears so I can listen to the sound of my mother's laughter. I'm blessed to have my lips so I can speak to those I love. I'm blessed to have my hands so I can paint whenever I please. I'm blessed to have my legs so I can still walk on this earth. I must remember that I am blessed. What I would like you to do is, just for a moment, indulge me, take a deep breath and close your eyes. And close your eyes and just remember in this moment right here, right now, to have a deep feeling of gratitude for all that is going right in our lives. There's so much that is going right, so much to be grateful for all the people that we love, the people in our lives, the things that are going well, and to remind ourselves to hug the ones that we love just a little bit more, to embrace them and to tell them that you love them more often than you may have done so far, because the time is now. Open your eyes, please. And I think gratitude is, when we look at life through the mirror of gratitude, every day we can see miracles around us. It's magical. And I think we just forget that because we're wired to look at perhaps what is not working, but I think focusing on what is gives a huge amount of energy for us to keep moving forward. So a sense of gratitude. And then she talks about the importance of service, that if you can't change your own life, there is always someone else's, and there's so much wisdom in that, that for all those people who are dealing with some kind of difficulty, and I would argue that there's nobody in this room who doesn't have something that they're dealing with, this is the way forward. I think we can heal ourselves by pouring ourselves into serving other people. That's where true healing lies. And that's, I think, the importance of giving. So I shared with you, leadership is about consistency, and behaviors are anchored by clarity of values. Values come from our experiences. my profound experience of loss of my daughter has shaped me. I've embraced it, I've accepted it and allowed it to shape me into who I am as a human, as a person, as a leader, and how I show up every single day in my effort to be the very best version of who I can be. I want to now talk to you, we've spoken about leadership, I want to talk to you about resilience. So how do you sort of get up every time you get knocked down? How did I find the strength to keep moving? And I want to share that with you. Well, to me, the real epiphany was when I was lost, having lost 2 daughters, by the way. I lost Tanya, who was 8 months old, much earlier. So Aditi and I have, borne a lot of suffering together. And I think, how do you really, as a parent, recover from something like that? We have, fortunately, a wonderful and a healthy son, Ishan, who lives in New York. He's a fantastic musician, incredible child. But the loss, I think we all carry. It's like like pebbles in a shoe. They just move around, but they're always there. Always there. I still feel it all the time. And this is the epiphany that I had, that the only way I could move forward was to first learn to love myself again. I think that the path towards others is inside out, which is you have to first learn to forgive yourself and learn to love yourself again, because only when you do that will you be in a position to serve others. So that was my first realization. And the second is, I shared with you how leadership is a privilege. All of us have that privilege. The second thing is that, can we convert our pain into purpose in the enterprise that we steward? We don't have control in the world around us, but we have control over each individual enterprise and our circle of friends, our communities that we steward. Can we actually convert our pain into some meaningful purpose in that endeavor? And it is by doing these 2 things that I have been able to find the energy and strength to move forward. So I'll share with you what loving myself means. So loving myself meant indulge myself in all the silly dreams that I may have, which many of us may want to postpone and say, one day when I'm retired, when I'm rich, when I'm this or when I'm that, I will do this, I will learn to play the guitar, I will sing, I will, it's all in the future. And my ask is, do it now. Take the time now, because the only moment that exists in our life is the present moment. So you laugh at this, but these were my 3 silly ideas. One, as a classic Indian, I always wanted to go to Harvard. I'm sure many of you have had that dream. I could never afford to go there, so I said, okay, now that I have the time, so I went to Harvard. I went there for 3 months, found it very healing. Secondly, I said, I'm a musician. I play the guitar, I sing songs, I write music, and I said, I'm going to actually put my music out on Spotify and iTunes, even though nobody may listen to it except for my wife. And I'm hoping by speaking to all of you, you will go after this and look me up on Spotify, and you multiply my listeners list dramatically. So I've got some songs. I hired a studio and recorded some songs. And third, I love teaching. I love surrounding myself with young minds, because young minds are not cynical. Young minds still believe there can be a better world. And I love to be with young minds and help expand their definition of leadership can be. So I did all of this, and through that I nurtured myself, and then I was able to step forward. And then I have leveraged the incredible privilege that I have of leading this enterprise. I run about 4,000 stores, 130,000 people across 11 countries in the US. I'm the chairman of the company now. And we have defined our purpose to make the world healthier and happier. Not make money, not enterprise value. Enterprise value is the end result of making the world healthier and happier through our impact agenda, by building an inclusive culture where everyone belongs, by serving our communities, by protecting our planet, by making an endeavor collectively to leave the world much better than we found it. I think it's a very important responsibility that each one of us carry. And finally, I want to close with this quote from Aisha's book, where she says that, we all have one life. Well, many of us believe in multiple lives, but we only remember one life at a time. So let's make it gigantic. Let's make it impactful. Let's aim for something great. Let's aim for the moon. Let's stretch ourselves and make this life really count. Let's not just be ordinary. Let's be extraordinary. But then remember that as we are striving for that greatness, there'll be some darkness, tough times. And as we walk together, in those tough times, still remember to have that sense of gratitude, to catch the glittering stars along the way, because there are always glittering stars, no matter how dark our path might look. Thank you very much.
I got to give you a hug, Niraj. And I want to give a shout out to Aditi as well. If you don't mind, please stand up, please. So we can't let Naren go because there's so much wisdom here. Couple of questions. Anyone want to ask any hard question? I mean, he can't have any hard questions. You've answered everything. Right? So any questions for Nirain or
either for me or for Aditi?
Yeah, please. Aditi, you come up here too, please. I want you to, please. You have to. You are a partner, equal partner with.
She's more than an equal partner.
More than equal. Please come on up. Question, PV? Yeah. Microphone, please. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story. It's moving, touching. Unfortunately, I know a lot of families who've been through this, and for the survivors, there is a guilt that goes with it. So I was curious, what advice would you have on how people should behave, and what is the protocol? Right. What is the right way to be supportive, yet at the same time give the space and have the ability to be a journeyman, right, without being intrusive? What's that balance? And because there is no answer that one has been through, so curious to see how you're a supporting network, and how would one. What advice would you give to others who are going through this?
You know, okay. Yeah. So I think it's a very good question, because I think people around you don't quite know how to react, because they can't say I know how you feel, because nobody really knows how you feel, and then they feel awkward, and then they sometimes stay away, and you start losing your people because they're afraid to really come close. I would say that as grieving parents, we need our friends. We don't want our friends to withdraw, and we don't want our friends to walk on eggshells, and we just want for them to be who they are, and just be there for us, physically and emotionally. Just the physical presence. You don't have to say anything. There's nothing that can be said, but just knowing that you have people who care for you, and the best way to show that is by showing up and being with you, I think is very, very healing and very supportive.
I just wanted to add to that. I think silence is what the other person needs, and you need to meet them where they are. I can be very happy one day, I can be totally destroyed the other. And I think, like Nirain said, inclusion is really important. So I love texts when people will say, I'm having a dinner tonight. I thought of you, not sure if you can come. That's it. It's just like you're just saying your thoughts. And then it's up to me to say, I'm coming or I'm not coming, or ignore it or not ignore it, So it's just about where the other person is. They could be anywhere, really. And I think the thing is not to say, she's already been born again, don't worry about her. All of that you don't know how the other person, where they are in their grief process, So I think silence is just beautiful. Just your presence is so healing.
I think another one that doesn't work is enough time has passed. Get a handle on yourself.
Get a handle on yourself. Get over it.
No.
You know? I can't believe you're still crying.
That doesn't work.
It's when it's a child, it's such a part of you, even when it's a partner. No, there's a lovely book written by C.S. Lewis called A Grief Observed. I love giving that to people who've lost somebody, you know. Like a friend of mine sent me a book after Aisha died that a lady had written after she lost her husband. I was like, that was not helpful, you know. I don't want to think about him going. Right now, I'm just grieving about her, you know. So be really careful what you send them, you know. I love giving Aisha's book because it has so many thoughts about life and death. And it has such a plethora of thoughts that a person can take from it only what they want, you know. Notes to myself. It's just a beautiful, intense book. I think just one line of you're in my thoughts, because that's what happens to us, right? When somebody we know loses somebody they loved, they're always on our mind. And I just love having that from friends, you know, when they say, I'm thinking of you. So
question
beautiful.
here.
Thank you for sharing. I think it was very touching. I was going to ask you, how did you heal yourself? But now, because you have answered the question, I would like to ask you something. There are many schools of reading, teaching, listening, everything. Can we think of opening a school how to handle grief? And I will be there to help you out.
It's one of my dreams. That's what I've been telling him we need to do now.
Yeah.
Is because, you know, it shows that therapy doesn't really work. I'm a mental health therapist. And research shows that in the first year, year and a half, the pain is so raw that therapy doesn't really work.
Yeah.
I healed by just reading about other people's grief. I wanted to connect. It was somehow healing for me to know that other people had grieved and how they had handled it. So I love to read. I love to see movies that talk about pain. I think for him it was different. He just got so busy. He didn't have time to think. I did nothing and I just sobbed. I think I have sobbed buckets of tears.
Yeah.
And I allow myself to be up one day and down another. Like Aisha has a lovely line in her book. It says, being depressed just means I'm under repair.
Yeah.
So for me, I tell my clients that, you're just repairing, it's fine, you know. So allowing the permission to be not okay. I think that helps you become okay someday.
Yeah, because my dad, when he passed away, you know, I was traveling all across. I used to take the sessions, go in the hotel and cry. And I was not okay crying. But now I realize that it's okay to
It is, and I always think, you know, tears fall on the heart and they heal the heart.
Yeah, I think so.
There's a reason they fall there.
Yeah. Thank you so much. It was so very personal. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. One more, Ashok, and Salil, and then we'll have to stop.
You are a really blessed family. Some of the thoughts that you shared from Aisha, they have the wisdom of a 100-year-old sage. Were you a spiritual family all along, or did this episode and of course the passing of the first daughter, did that inform your spirituality or progress it? Were you always a spiritual family?
What a beautiful question. I grew up in a Hindu family, as did he. I had a very deep personal experience when Tanya was in hospital. Very few people have asked this question, and I came to Christ. I just feel like he appeared, I saw him, I had dreams about him, and it was a whole experience when Tanya was not well, over 10 days. And it was surreal what happened. So both my girls are actually buried very close to this hotel. They're right across the road at the burial ground, the Christian burial ground. And so I'm a born-again Christian. But I believe that faith, you have to come to it. I don't believe that I should be Muslim because I was born in a Muslim family, or Christian because I was born in I really believe you have to find what speaks to you in your heart. So I'm very, very spiritual. It's my faith that holds me, but I don't attend church. I read, I attend Bible class. I don't know what Nirain wants to say, but Aisha, I never tried to, I only talked to her about what I believed, And so we buried Aisha, but if you ask me what was Aisha's faith, I always left it blank. I felt when she grows up, she must. So my son used to be atheist, now he's agnostic. So we're a family who really believe in letting each other all be who we are.
Well, I would say that I'm very supportive of Aditi's journey, and anything that helps heal you, I think is great. I think for me, I have had cycles of anger, of disappointment, of questioning, and not understanding. And I would say I'm still seeking. I'm still a seeker. I'm on the journey. And I'm still looking for answers.
Salil, last question, please. Yeah.
Hi. I was thinking yesterday when A.R. Rahman came, that was the highlight for me for this session, at this conference. I think I would have missed out something really big if I was not here today. I was going to my third year in IIT when my dad was going through cancer, and then he passed away. And it was a pretty moving moment for me. And I wrote a few lines that I would like to read to you.
Yeah.
Please.
I call it transformation. So I'm actually very moved today, so I may not be able to remember everything, but I'll try. There'll be moments in your life when you feel dejected. Dejected from the whips of time, dejected because your words don't rhyme. Dejected from the deeds of your friends, dejected from the changing trends. Dejected from monotony of life, dejected from your own wife. Dejected because a girlfriend ditched, dejected from others getting rich. Dejected from a fastidious boss, dejected from dealing with dross. Dejected from losing your dad, dejected from a newsreel sad. These are a few, you may have more. Cause for dejections, your life has no doors. But there is one thing you must remember. These ups and downs often live together. Today you pale, tomorrow you'll blossom. Today you sad, tomorrow you'll be glad. Your dejections will be overthrown by jubilations. These broken steps will form a stairway to glory, which will climb and write a new story. A story bringing applaud and appreciation. You may want to call it a transformation.
Wow. Wow.
Can I give you guys a hug?
Of course. Of course.
Thank you. That was beautiful.
We can't end on a better note than this positive close. One last question. Are any of the paintings for sale? Okay. Someday they might sell the paintings for a good cause. Please. Please. Absolutely. Yeah. Indiaspora can help you. If there's ever going to be an auction or anything like that, we will help you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Sanjeev, you want to talk about the logistics have all changed because we went over time. So explain the logistics, please.
Thanks so much. Yeah, we've run over time, so we are going to change some logistics. So please take your tea and coffee and come right back into the rooms if you don't mind right away, please. The breakout sessions are starting now. One in this room and one in the room next door in the Aftab Mehtab. What are the breakouts that we have right now in each room? There is a knowledge sharing breakout in the other room. And soft power is in this room. Soft power in this room, knowledge sharing in the other room. Please take your tea and coffee and let's start right away. And we'll curtail the breakouts by 15 minutes each. All right? Thank you.